I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Oh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all, we promised we'd be cordial.
Hey everyone, Kristin Walker here, and I've got Barry Toone with me. Hi, Barry.
Hi, thanks for having me on, Kristin.
Absolutely. And we've got one of our amazing podcasters on the network with the show Positive Connections, Michael Koch. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Now you've been on the network for a while, and I want our listeners to know, we're going to do a little bit of backstory. I know you've been on before, but we'll do a little bit of backstory about something that deserves way more than just a backstory. But we have a lot of first responders that are tuning into my show, which I absolutely love. And you know how I feel about that. Like, the people that are on the front lines of care, especially mental health care, do not get enough attention, and part of that is their fault, and part of that is the world's fault. So
there you go.
Exactly. There's blame to go around everywhere, and there's a lot of different reasons. But Mike, tell our listeners, if you don't mind, just a little bit about your background in terms of being a first responder.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for having this network going and having me on this network to be able to talk to other first responders and share their stories and help them out. And for me, as a first responder, what my story was, I was a police officer for 19 years and dealt with a lot of different stressors that I was able to sort of shove down and not really deal with emotionally or talk about. I dealt with alcohol, used that as my coping mechanism. Injuries led to prescription medication. Prescription medications led to using that to cope with my issues and addiction, and pretty much the loss of my career after 19 years and beginning a new life in recovery and working on myself. So that's where I came from.
What's that? I mean, it's such a slippery slope, and people can look at it from the outside looking in, like they can watch some SVU TV show or Criminal Minds or whatever and see, oh, cop gone wrong or something, and it's nicely packaged in this little story for TV. And the reality is, it is such an easy to understand slippery slope when you're in the field. You were an undercover detective.
Correct.
And so talk to us a little bit about how, I want people to understand just how easy it is when you are brushed up against that, and this is what you're dealing with, and this is who the people that you are investigating and you are undercover with, how easy it is to make those micro decisions that take you down a path to where you end up where you ended up.
Definitely, Stephanie. You hit on a lot of really good points. The last 10 years of my career, I was undercover narcotics detective, and I did great work. And I never wanted to have to be addicted to any kind of thing. I knew that alcohol was a major issue, and I was able to convert over to prescription medications. And it is a slippery slope. I know people that listen that don't really know a lot about or have never been a first responder of any type. The sensationalization of it all on TV, and it's an hour program usually, and the crime solved at the end of the hour, and all the bad guys go to jail, and the good guys are heroes, right?
Yep.
And sometimes they get scraped up and they go through issues, but it's solved in a relatively short time. We're talking about sometimes years of different incidences that we face out there and deal with, and especially when you work with the culture of crime and drugs, it's fairly common to get sort of sucked up into that. And however, most officers don't resort to abusing alcohol and drugs because of that. It usually has an underlying stigma that we're trying to protect, because we're worried about other people knowing our weaknesses, because we're taught, and we're doing this job as a police officer, we're taught to hold in our emotions, and that is one of our protectors when we're out there. This is going to get us home safe and alive. It's going to get us to the situation. So I can go to a scene, take care of the scene. I could be stone-faced, bulletproof pretty much, but afterwards, after absorbing whatever I absorbed, it could be a lot of tragedies. We experience so many tragedies out there that we're human just like anybody else is. No human being are prepared to deal with the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of it has to do with children, suicides, death, car accidents, tragedy, kids being taken away from their parents. And it's not just a one-time occurrence. It happens time and time
Every
again.
day. Yeah, sometimes every day.
It does. It does. And a lot of times, if there is not a proper peer organization in your organization, in your police department or the fire department, there's not really a place where you can safely process it and get it out so you can move on to the next call.
So do you think that what helps, or, what we're seeing as, there's more awareness out there, is because, the job is not going to change. I mean, I know from the shows I've done that, I've spoken to some of the people that, out in your area in, San Diego, Southern California, that have said, look, we used to get calls for a certain area and we know, okay, put on the Kevlar vest because we're going to that area. And now today it's like, well, there is no that area. Every area is that area. So it's only getting more stressful. But do you think that this, this advent towards, okay, mental health care, talking about it, you're not a machine, do you think that that's actually helping first responders deal with the stress that comes with the job so that they can go through it without, having things like addiction come up, or if it does come up, that they deal with it much more quickly before it becomes an even bigger problem?
Well, you're exactly right, Stephanie. And see, that's why I think about speaking out about it. Those that have gone through issues and are in recovery over it, that I can actually speak it. I've noticed a positive shift. I know people in the San Diego area that have gone through many PTSD issues, drugs, alcohol, loss, and very good survival stories. And once to heal from within, they're more apt to actually start talking about it and saying, look, break this others. We're going to stand up and speak our truth just so others can hear us and maybe hear themselves a little bit. And it might bring them closer to say, you know what? I think my career is on the line. You know what? Maybe I'm drinking a little bit too much. I have to deal with this anger issue I'm dealing with right now. I have these scenes in my head. I'm having nightmares. I'd probably be better off I talk to somebody about it. It might bring them past that edge of fear where they step over it and say, look, Mike's talking about his whole life, his whole story. He doesn't have any really filters on it. He's an open book. I could probably talk about it a little bit. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the more of us that actually stand up and say, yeah, I'm not afraid to say, I'm not fearful to say that I had some problems in my life, but I've overcome them. And I'm actually maybe currently working on these issues. But I want you to know that there are people that are suffering too, and you're not alone. And a lot of us, at how I felt when I was a police officer, and especially when I was a narcotics detective, I thought that I was suffering this alone. I had to take care of it myself. It was my problem. I got myself into it. I was addicted. And it turned out I lost everything before I was able to reach out for help. I was in internal affairs office the very first time, knowing my career was down the toilet. I was going to go to jail. I was going to lose everything else. I was going to have bankruptcy. I was going to get a divorce. And that was the very first time that I ever said, I am addicted. I am an addict. I need help. And even though that was horrendous to say, it was so relieving, but I knew it was actually a little bit too late for me to actually save things besides myself.
Right.
Mike, let me ask you a question. As I hear your story, we know that there are a lot of departments out there now that have good peer support teams and good peer support groups. There's still a lot of departments that need to have a long way to go. But what was it like 20 years ago when you were in the thick of your story, struggling? Tell me what the peer support group was even like, or did it even exist, or was it just a skeleton? Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, it actually was only 10 years ago. So I was on the force in 92 or 93. So what the atmosphere was, at least what I knew of, especially with my department, peer support was more of like a stepping stone to like if you actually go to peer support, if you go to these specialized units that no one really wants to go to, you'll be more apt to get promoted. At least that's what I thought in my head. And it wasn't really one of those secret.
Oh, Mike, you're cutting out.
I'm sorry. Am I here now?
Yeah, you're there now. Okay. So start that all the way from the beginning, what it was like 10 years ago.
Okay. So 10 years ago, it was more like the peer support was a stepping stone to maybe get into another position, a higher management position. At least that's what I thought in my head. And the trust I didn't feel was there, that I could actually trust another coworker that was in peer support with what was going on with me. I was afraid I was going to get reported. And even if it was like I was dealing with some traumatic incident that I was having emotional problems and I was crying about, I wasn't about to reveal that to anybody because I didn't have that trust. 10 years ago, it was a little different. I know now for a fact the department that I work for, they are building something really great there. And all of San Diego, they're starting to get in line with San Diego PD, building really specialized units for peer support.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, really good to hear. I think it's interesting where, I mean, I know you don't see this. You never see it when you're the one that's been doing it. I know people have said to me, oh my gosh, you, Kristin, have helped move the needle when it comes to eradicating stigma. And I mean, I don't look at things that way, or I don't really care about praise or whatever. If I was a part of that, fantastic.
Right.
I just don't look at that. I'm not a narcissist, so I don't really look at things that way.
Sure.
But I know you and I, Mike, have had those interesting conversations where we've been like, well, yeah, it was a big deal for you to come and speak out in the way that you have. That has actually helped change the conversation. You may not see how you've played a part in that, but the fact that you talk about it in the way that you're talking about it and do what you do, that's part of what has made change.
Yeah, and I do see it in bits and pieces, and those bits and pieces that come back to me are the most rewarding thing about what I do. To have someone call me from Kentucky that has a similar story than me, and she's telling me that if I would have heard your podcast in 2017, things might have been different, but I hear it now, and she's going through stuff right now, and to have people contact me, and they're able to like even call me.
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing, is picking up that phone and making that call, and not worry about who's another line, because you already know what's going on with me. open about all that stuff. So, and to feel confident and safe. But yeah, you do a lot of good work in your network and putting the word out there. And we see it in little bits and pieces,
Yeah.
and it's going to grow. It's growing for sure.
Yeah, it's those little steps every single day. And, I mean, you've probably heard this too. There are so many people over the years that have contacted me and said, I just listen to the show sometimes every night before I go to bed, sometimes the same episode, just because it's validation and they're going through some kind of horrific trauma. And, you know what that's like. You've got to rewire your brain. You need to hang on to anything that is going to keep your brain in a, somewhat non-inflamed state. Try to rewire those neural pathways. And so if you, that's what's so great about audio. You don't have to be visually looking at someone that maybe someone else can see. It's so private. And you're just listening to it and you can fall asleep to it. And it really does help. And I think about that with, the people that have called in. And, I want to say too, first responders are, EMTs, police officers, anyone in the military, firemen, firewomen, fire people. I don't know what you call it now, but, nurses, doctors, anyone on the front line of care is is considered a first responder. So this is a wide swath of people.
It really is. And I think people are starting to understand too, especially with the suicide rates and all that going around, people actually asking for help and getting help and breaking that stigma. What I find really interesting in talking to other people, especially early on when I was more fearful of talking about it, is listening to other people that had similar life experiences. And I relate to them on that level of, well, they were a first responder of some type.
Hey listeners, a quick but important notice for all the shows that we'll be doing for our first responders. In 2018, the number of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and veterans, anyone who's considered a first responder, who died of suicide was greater than the combined total killed in the line of duty. More attention is being paid, but help is often elusive. Even with more available resources, those who are first in line to help us actually asking for help for themselves, that can be the hardest thing for them to do. Mental Health News Radio Network is working with Stepstone Connect to give voice to our incredible first responders. Stepstone Connect is an organization born of the belief that accessibility and confidentiality will eliminate traditional barriers to treatment. Privacy and the peace of mind that comes with it, combined with easy, everywhere access, underlines Stepstone's mission and treatment philosophy. It's simple. With access to the internet and a device with a camera, you're a click away from leading mental health clinicians who specialize in the treatment of PTSD and other trauma-related injuries for first responders and their families. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please don't let another day pass before discovering what Stepstone can do. Stronger connections, everywhere access, stepstoneconnect.com. You can find out more by going to their website, stepstoneconnect.com, or call 800-495-3761. Now back to the show.
And I remember listening to a guy speak his story, and it was so moving. And at the very end, I thought to myself, I've never heard someone tell my story that way.
Yeah.
It was completely my story in a whole different context, and I totally related to it. And that's what I am so attracted to recovery about, is that, we're all in this together. We're all human beings. And just because it's happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening to someone that you might even know very well.
Right. Barry, let me ask you a question. Being in the field that you're in, where, you're on the counseling side of working with first responders, what have you seen change from when you started Stepstone Connect to, where you are today in terms of the receptivity towards first responders getting help, making that phone call?
Well, Mike is right. just the fact that departments, chiefs, peer support groups are having these conversations more frequently, more openly, more honestly is a real big deal. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen a big change. A lot more reaching out. The number of officers, firefighters who are willing to pick up the phone and ask questions, be open to their peers about the things that they're going through. Those things just didn't happen
Yeah.
several years back. I mean, I'm sure there were individual cases where it happened, but not with the kind of frequency and commonality that you see now. It's really been exciting to see this. It's why I so much appreciate people like Mike who have been on the cutting edge of this and done so much to move the needle, because it is making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and it's interesting to see. You know, I love interviewing first responder males because I can bust their chops like no other.
And you do a good job
Exactly.
of it. It's funny you say that, because a couple of the ones you've interviewed with me afterwards, they kind of have this moment where they're quiet and they go,
Right.
wow, I really like that. But, they kind of took a fun beating. They knew it was meant in love, but
Yeah.
you have a gift for doing that. And I enjoy listening to it.
It's my favorite
Yeah, me
thing
too.
because I know that that's the culture, and it's so fun. I love that, I mean, that is how men relate. That is a male thing that happens. I mean, women can do that too, to a certain degree, but men really do that. That is a relatable thing. And I really like that. And so for me, that's really fun. And sometimes, Barry, we're going to need to record our after show conversations because, we'll get somebody on, and Mike, you can totally understand this too. We'll get somebody on and they're very serious. And they're going through a show. And then the minute that I stop recording, then it's like relax time. And then I'm like going for the kill
Right.
with the comebacks. And
You know what? And Kristin, that's a positive coping mechanism too,
Yes.
especially of first responders. It's that dark humor.
yeah,
That dark humor that we use, we need that to cope. A lot of us, just can't go to a separate room somewhere and do some deep breathing exercises.
Right.
We need that to get through the tough times, definitely.
That's what I think is interesting. And I want to talk about this, Mike, because I think this is really interesting. The culture, we're in cancel culture or PC culture. And what's difficult about this is I'll interview someone and there's some article about them online that, they said this insensitive thing and it just makes everybody so angry. And, let's just discount their entire career because they said something that people that aren't in the field take as super offensive. And I can read that and go, okay, wait a minute. You have no idea how much being able to say whatever. It's like someone who's, working at a morgue can talk about eating liver and Chianti while they're over a dead body. I mean, you have to be able to talk the lingo of what you're in because it's part of what we're talking about, the release. But outside of the field, we're so upset about every little thing that it's with everything so online, it's making it hard to foster the continuation of being open and talking about your feelings and sharing whatever, when you know that what you may be sharing, the public is going to look at and scrutinize in a different way because they're not in the field.
Well, and context really matters. Mike's got to know this when he talks about the dark humor. I mean, we live in a society where having a low threshold for getting offended is a badge of honor.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to be able, and there's no question that we've got to be sensitive and we've got to be kind. All those things are important, but context matters.
Yes.
Context matters. And if the officers, the firefighters who live in that culture and who need to be able to speak out in a way that helps them to cope with what they're going through, I think there is an element of just kindness on the part of everyone else in giving them a break and letting them have that opportunity.
Yeah, and the public's always looking for something to shoot back at. There's a lot of that going on where, the sensationalism of things that happen in the field of first responders, they want to throw rocks at. And that's okay. We got to understand we have to be vigilant and get out of the hyper-vigilant stage, because a lot of us are always on point and are always worried about what's going to happen next. But to have a safe place to land, especially with fellow first responders that are going through issues, and having competent clinicians also available that are there, that understand the culture. They might not be former first responders themselves, although I know several good ones here. I went back to school and got my counseling license, and I do therapy and counseling and work specifically with first responders. So there are people out there, and my goal is to connect with those people that want to connect with people that have the same outlook, and they want to actually really help promote wellness among us. So we don't have to lose our careers. We don't have to retire early. We don't have to do these things that we probably normally wouldn't do because we're holding in emotions that we feel that the stigma is so strong that we can't talk about.
Right. Exactly. And I don't know what's going to change. That's a bigger conversation than this show to talk about, changing our culture. We're going through this pendulum swing, and as pendulum swings happen, we were way over on the wrong side, and now we're way over on the other side, and somewhere we'll come back to the middle. But I think, those of us that are out there just continuing to beat that drum, talk about it. I mean, we will, get to that happy middle at a certain point, and humanize all of our experiences. I know for me, it was so great. It has been so great to know you, Stephen Kowalkiewicz. I mean, the list is endless of people that I have interviewed in my own life because of the amount of, EMT visits I had to my house dealing with my ex-husband's health issues. It just helped me, as someone not in the field, hear your stories, hear what you go through, so that when I make that 911 call yet again,
right,
and someone's showing up, okay, these are people. They got their own lives,
Yep.
They've got their own issues, they've got their own whatever, and they're here to help keep someone alive, someone I love. And so when they come to my home to help me, let's treat them like a human being and respect that they're helping save someone I love. That's been a huge thing for me to realize,
Yeah. They're doing this to help people. That's what I got into law enforcement for. I wanted to be out there to help. And the reality of it that most people don't see is a lot of dark side to helping people 24/7. And if we don't help each other and help our brothers and sisters out there, and Barry, what you're doing with Stepstone Connect is amazing. I think that you're another positive force in this whole drive to help break that stigma and show people that they're not alone in this.
Well, I appreciate that. We're trying, and we're seeing success. I think the goal for all of us is to normalize the kind of thing that we've just been discussing today. First responders being able to be open and to talk about what it is they're going through. If we can normalize that, and that becomes the rule, not the exception, I think we're going to have healthier men and women on the streets. They're going to have better lives. Their family lives are going to be better. They're even going to interact and perform better out there on the streets.
Absolutely.
And that's what we all want.
Exactly.
Well, Mike, let's close this with talking about, what you're doing with your podcast and the work that you're doing now, and how you, are working to continue to move that needle, even if it's by centimeters or even millimeters forward.
Well, definitely. Well, with my podcast, Positive Connections Radio, I started in 2018, and I, select the people that are on there that could. Basically, I've named the show Positive Connections because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for positive connections throughout the country, so I can connect the dots, and then those people that hopefully are on my show and are listening connect their own dots with each other and work together, so we don't have to like reinvent the wheel. So anybody out there that has a story to share of inspiration, hope, things that they've gone through, people that work in the field that are looking to spread the message and get people to raise their hand and say they need help is definitely welcome to be on my show and give me a call anytime. I'll give you my phone number. It's 760-224-6631. 760-224-6631. Please give me a call, give me a text. You can email me at M, like the first initial of my name, MKOCH 1515 at gmail.com. And yeah, back in 2012, when all this happened, I went into recovery. I decided to go back to school and go into counseling because I loved group therapy so much. I did a year of therapy and group counseling. And so now I'm working in California, in San Diego, Carlsbad at West Coast Recovery Center.
Nice.
And I just started working about 2 weeks ago, and they hired me on to basically start a first responder program. So I'm in the very initial stages of starting something. It might be a nonprofit-based type of thing. What I've run into the last 5 or 6 years dealing with getting first responders in for treatment is basically getting them to call in and seeing they needed the help. So I reach out to all the peer support groups in San Diego County, including fire department and border patrol. So they have my number. And if I can't help them with what I'm doing personally with counseling or the place I'm working at, I'll have information. Hopefully in the future, I'll have a lot more where I can direct them to positive people that I know and I trusted and that I vetted, because the first thing that first responders are looking at are trust and who's making the money. At least that's what I did.
Yeah.
And if they know you're coming at it with empathy and understanding and positive direction, I know that they're going to get more help that way and not shut the door.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about a very, and wisely so, this is not a put down, but a very cynical group of people.
Oh, hell yeah. Check your sources. Check your sources.
Yeah. And you have to understand, listeners, they are trained to be this way. So this is not like some character flaw. Oh, they're so cynical. No, part of the training is to be watching everything, especially in your field, who's at the back door, how many exits are there, whatever. Like that's your training, is to look at,
right.
What's the undercover shady possibility here. So that's, you can't compartmentalize that, to the extent that it's only in one area. You're going to look at every situation. I mean, I remember driving with a relative who was an undercover detective, and we're driving down the same road. And I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful and it's sunny outside. And he's like, did you see that drug dealer on the corner? And then, and I'm like, what is it that you're seeing?
Well, as a matter of fact, right this moment, I pulled into a lot right across from the beach in Carlsbad, and I backed in, and I'm doing I'm talking on my phone in this podcast, and you actually brought me to reality. Where I'm like, dude, there's like a dirt mound hill behind me. No one can get my car behind me. So, and there's an ocean in front of me. So the only avenues of like escape are my left or right. So yeah, definitely. I totally get it.
Yep. You can't help it.
Yep.
Exactly. That's hilarious. I know. And I love that. That's the stuff that I love busting chops about, because it makes everybody laugh. But awesome.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm so glad that I got to meet you in person in California, that you're on.
Yes, that was awesome.
Wasn't it? That was so awesome. And with our great friend, Stephen Kavalkovich. And I'm so glad you're doing a show. Everyone, if you want to hear just an amazing show, Positive Connections on Mental Health News Radio Network. You can go to iTunes, anywhere, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever app you use, and look up Positive Connections, and you can listen to his show. And you can also go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and there's a feed there that has every show on our network, every show that we do. You can, plug that into your app, and then you can listen to every single show. So make sure that you do that as well. So Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kristin. And it's so nice meeting you, Barry, too. I hope I meet you in person soon.
Yeah, let's make sure we do that. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for all you're doing.
You got it.
Awesome. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, of course, Barry. And we will be back on for our next First Responder show on Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but our opposing.
Good boy.